Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Apsona calculated fields do make your life easier as a Salesforce admin, and our requisite admin, Laurie Gardner, is here joining us from the St. George's School in Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you, Laurie, so much for being willing to present and share some of your expertise with our team as well as our customers. This webinar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel later on today or this week, and we'll also be including a slide deck. So the slides will be provided as a PDF download. And excited to have you guys learn more about how to make your life easier as a Salesforce admin. Next slide. So Apsona, as a brief reminder, as a brief sort of intro for those of you that may not know, Apsona is called the Golden App. It's made out of two words in Hindi, app and Sona. It's been around for a while. You can see when we were founded, and roughly we actually have about 1,800 customers now worldwide, probably 11,000, 12,000 users across those instances. We love what we do. We basically think that we are around to make your life easier as an admin by helping you see, review, and clean your data with the dedupe match, data cleanliness options, and seeing and updating your data, creating key reports that you can't get with Salesforce reports, but you can with Salesforce with Apsona multi-step reports, and then capitalizing on that data by creating documents, Excel merges, and email templates. So data review, data reporting, and then creating documents. So we support all data models. Whatever data model you have, we support that. And below at the bottom of the screen, you'll see some of our favorite customers. Beyond that, we love to just have our customers show off what they're doing with Apsona and how they're leveraging Apsona to create value in their organization and to create wins for admins. That's my new sort of buzz phrase. So I can't say concatenate 5 times fast, but I can say wins for admins. Without further ado, let me introduce Laurie Gardner. And Laurie, let me have you start sharing your screen and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Justin. Let's see, let me get sharing.
Splendid, we can see it.
Great, thank you. So as Justin mentioned, I work at St. George's School in Rhode Island. I am an Apsona Superfan, though it is not my official job title. I am the Director of Data Management in the Advancement Office on campus. I have been a Salesforce administrator, I guess a little over 5 years now, and prior to that, I have many years of coding, writing reports, data wrangling, and on any given day, I am probably spending most of my time in Apsona. If I'm in Salesforce, I'm in Apsona. It's my go-to for reports, for hunting for data anomalies, for updating or fixing data, for all kinds of merges. So it's, that makes me the super fan. I wouldn't Salesforce without Apsona.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm, as part of the school's advancement team, the constituents that I'm dealing with are primarily alumni, parents, other donors, and report or list requests are usually surrounding fundraising or engagement data. So that's what the examples that I'm going to show today are related to that type of data. So what I'm going to show you are real life scenarios that where I'll explain what the request or the problem was. I'll demonstrate the solution, how and why I used a calculated field and JavaScript, and why Apsona is the best tool for the job. So I'm going to show you how to combine fields together to reduce the number of columns and also format the data, perform calculations between numbers and also between dates, manipulating field values to produce a more meaningful output, and also to create custom groupings. Also, just as kind of a side note, I'm expecting that everyone kind of has some familiarity with multi-step reports, maybe not necessarily creating calculated fields. So Vijaytha with Apsona has a recording. Justin, maybe you can share that with everyone.
I will.
That covers the basics of creating calculated fields, the components, the options, the syntax, and troubleshooting. You don't necessarily need to have that background for what I'm going to show you today, but just wanted to also point out that that recording was really valuable.
Yeah. And Laurie, it seems like as you're jumping right in, one of the things to sort of help clarify for people, we are explicitly going into Apsona's reporting module. So there is a number of ways to solve the sort of key data requests and key field needs in Salesforce reports. But in scenarios where Laurie has explicitly sort of found real value from Apsona reports, she's focused on that. So while there are ways to create some of these features in Salesforce, she has created the value out of it, but we're only working within Apsona's reporting function.
Thanks for that clarification, Justin. So the first request that I wanted to show everyone was a list of current and former trustees. The request was to see both their name and class year combined in one column, which is something we do very frequently in a lot of different reports. And then also seeing how much time had elapsed between when they graduated and when they began their service as a trustee. So the first thing, to combine the name in the class year, we're going to concatenate. It's a fun word to say it with me. I know I can't hear all of you, but I know you're saying it too. Thanks, Justin. So what does concatenate mean? It's a fancy term for just combining two or more field values. So the example I have shown here, we've got our alum, Edgar F. Codd, who, by the way, is a real person. He's not really an alum. He is the inventor of the relational database model in 1970. A little bit of history for you there. So I've got the name field, the class year field, and what we want to create is the combination, the concatenated field. In order to do that, the calculation that we're creating is the name field. How we reference it is the curly brackets, the exclamation, and the name of the field. The plus sign is the concatenate operator. It's also used for addition, but in the case where there's a text field, Apsona knows that that means concatenate, not add. Then in between the name and the class year, we wanted a hyphen. So I enclose the hyphen and the spaces before and after it in quotes, in double quotes. Again, the concatenate operator. And to that, I'm adding the class year field. And this is the output that I will get. Edgar F. Codd, hyphen 1965. Pretty cool, but we can actually make this a little better, because in reality, how we would typically see an alum's name listed with their class year is just the single quote or the apostrophe and the last two digits of their class year. So how can we accomplish this? With a JavaScript method. Ooh. So what is a JavaScript method? If you were to Google it, Google would tell you that a JavaScript method is a property containing a function definition. What? That sounds very confusing to me, but really what a method does is perform an action on an object. It's really just like a prepackaged way of changing the result or changing the value of a field. So like in this case, the method that we're using is called slice. So the format of the calculated field is pretty much the same. We've got the name field, our concatenate addition sign. Instead of the hyphen, I'm putting a single quote enclosed in the double quotes, adding the class year field, but I'm now appending to the class year field the slice method. What slice does to the class year is takes the last two characters from the full value. The negative indicates to start at the end of the field. If this was a +2, if it was just a 2, then what I would get is Edgar F. Codd, single quote, 19. So the negative is what's telling Apsona, or the method, I should say, to take the last two characters or to start at the end of the field.
This is like the left or the right operator in Salesforce formula fields.
Yeah, yes.
Or
And
Excel.
it's also in Excel, exactly. Okay. So let me show you what this looks like. So you can see here, this is a sample report. This is the original name and class formula that we had created, calculated field. again, expecting that everyone has some that's a tough one to say, familiarity with multi-step reports. So I've added a calculations step, calculations with formulas. On my calculated fields tab, I'm going to add a new field. This will be my new, sorry, I've got a bunch of stuff already on here. My new name plus class using the slice operator, just so I know which one this is, or sorry, slice method. So the first thing I want to enter is the name field. Now I can just type it in. I can start literally typing the curly bracket and the exclamation, but Apsona makes it super easy to insert fields because they've got this drop down, insert reference to field. I'm going to take the full name field, type in my concatenate operator, type my literal space, single quote, end my double quote, my plus sign. Now I'm going to grab the class year field, type my slice operator, give it my -2, save that. Now when I run the report, I see the result is just as the example. I've got just the last 2 digits and the single quote rather than the full class year. So we were also asked to create a field that shows the number of years in between when they graduated and when they began their trustee assignment. So this is really another pretty simple calculation where you know how in Apsona, when you're adding a date field to a report, it gives you the option of choosing just the year or the month or the day. I think there's a bunch of options. So that's all this is. It's the start. This is actually a full date field, but I've used that feature in Apsona to pull just the year. And then I'm simply subtracting the class year to get the 20-year difference. Cool,
so
right?
this way, like I remember trying to do this in Salesforce formula fields, and I'd always have to get the date timestamp field on create a date, and then have to like make modifiers on that field to get it to fit. But if you use the Apsona, you use that operator to just make it a string 1985 or a number. I guess it's a number field.
Yeah, and actually, I believe Apsona in the calculated fields, it's smart enough to know, because our class year field is actually a string. So it's smart enough to know that we're trying to do math and it does the conversion to a number automatically, which is amazing.
Awesome.
So you can also do, whoops, sorry. You can also do date math with full dates, but something to keep in mind that the result of a date minus another date comes out in milliseconds per day, which is a pretty useless number and a pretty large number. So in order to convert it to years, or if you wanted days, or depending on what you're looking for, there's a pretty easy calculation that you need to add to that date math field. So I'm not going to go back into Apsona to show this one. I think it's pretty straightforward. And if you were paying attention when I was in there, you actually probably saw this, this field in there anyway, but happy to show it in more detail if needed later. So why did I use Apsona for this particular report request? Well, as Justin just alluded to, for one, I'd have to convert. I wouldn't be able to extract the year from the date field without applying a function to the date. Plus, I also would need to convert the class year from a string to a number. But the biggest problem is that Salesforce native reports only allows one row level formula field, one calculated field per report. So we wouldn't be able to do the calculation of the time between dates and have the combination, the concatenation, yep, I got to say it again, of the name and the class year. And even if we could, the slice method isn't available in Salesforce formula creation. In fact, no string methods are. I actually included a link here to a list of other JavaScript string functions that are also available.
That is a pain. I mean, I do have painful memories of trying to do this and going to back and finding the place on the notepad where I'd saved the left function, the right function, the mid function, and it was never something I'd sort of remember. So this is great. Thanks, Laurie.
Sure. So the next request is to create a call list. We have alumni volunteers for our annual Day of Giving who reach out to their classmates, but we don't share with them the specifics of the gifts that their classmates have given. We don't share the amount of the gift with them, but we do want them to know if they've given within the last 3 years. So what we needed to create was a field that shows a yes or a no for each of the fiscal years giving. So I'll go through it quickly here, but what we're basically saying, I've added these 3 new fields, new calculated fields that are saying if the fiscal year is greater than 0, fiscal year 23 giving, this field here, then show me a yes. If not, show me a no. And I'm gonna break this down a little bit more. So this statement here says if FY23, the value in the FY23 column is greater than 0, the if is implied, we don't have to type it. But if this evaluates to true, then the question mark is the then operator, then yes will appear. That will be the result of this field. If not, that's my else, which is represented by the colon, then no. So you can see up here, our alums, Edgar F. Codd, and our other alum, Gerardus Mercator, who of course everyone knows from the most commonly used map projection, the Mercator projection. That's right, folks, she's not just a data nerd, she's a map nerd too. Anywho, I digress. So you can see both of them gave in FY23, they both have yeses. Only Jerry gave in FY22, so he's a yes, but Edgar Codd is a no, and vice versa for FY21. So that's a simple if then else. We can actually get a little more complex with if then else fields. We also wanted to assign a number to help our volunteers prioritize the calls they were making. So what we wanted to basically, if someone gave last year but not this year, that's the highest priority. If they gave 2 years ago but not in the last 2 years, or not this year or the previous year, that's priority number 2, and everything else was 3. So what we've added to the if then else is 2 things. We're nesting multiple if then else's together, and we're also giving it multiple conditions. So this formula here, if FY22 is greater than 0, and the double ampersand is the and, meaning both of these conditions need to be true. So if FY22 is greater than 0 and FY23 equals 0, then remember, then that's our question mark, the result will be a 1. If not, that's our else. We've got another if condition. FY21 is greater than 0 and both FY22 and FY23 are equal 0. That's a 2. Everything else is a 3. So let me jump over to Apsona. I'm going to show you this one as well. Oops, that's not it. So this is ultimately what we end up sharing with our volunteers. They don't see the amount, they just see the yeses and the nos and the call priority. I mean, in reality, we shared other information. This was part of a merge, an Excel merge, which, ooh, by the way, true story. So this came from one of my coworkers who I realized had been doing this manually in Excel. Not to knock Excel, Excel is awesome, but she was actually taking all the amounts, replacing all the zeros with nos, replacing all the other values with yeses, then doing some sorting and filtering to create the priority. And the other thing is that this is a custom, there was also a custom object involved too. So it was, I don't know if you've worked with custom report types in Salesforce, but they can be a little kludgy, and you just don't have the same flexibility that you do with a multi-step report, which is one of the reasons that I chose to use Apsona, in addition to the limitation of only being able to create one row level formula field, and the fact that I was also using this with a merge action.
Yeah, I'm hearing sort of within your growth process with Apsona that you sort of took an initial solution, and then as you figured out that solution, you could add on to it. So one of the abilities is you can sort of add as many row level or add as many calculation fields as needed. And then additionally, you reference, hey, when I need to push this out to an Excel file to make it look really nice, that doc merge function allows you to say, hey, I can sort of customize this, make it look a certain way, deliver it to a key user that needs to maybe consume that information or use it, but it doesn't look sort of, like you said, a little doesn't look as nasty if you just sort of push it directly to export. You have the chance to finesse it aesthetically, make that Excel output file look nice with your doc merge license.
Precisely. And honestly, my coworker who was creating this report, who was doing all that manual work after I had created this Excel merge for her, was ecstatic. It was a game changer for her. It saved her not just hours and days, but possibly weeks of work. We have about, I think, 50 or 60 class volunteers for different classes. So she was going to need to do this 50 or 60 times.
Good. That's great. You're about the 2 solution mark. We're about 16 minutes in, Laurie.
Okay, great, perfect. So this is actually, I think I mentioned this earlier when you asked about the favorite thing I did this week in Apsona. It wasn't this specific example, but it was concatenating multiple blocks, which I feel like, I don't know if it's in any of Apsona's documentation. I feel like I just kind of stumbled upon it myself, but if it is somewhere, that's great. I think your documentation is excellent, so it's probably there somewhere. Anyway, so the request here was to show, to create a list of our alums and all of their education after graduating. We're a high school, so we wanted to see what colleges they had attended, and most of our alums are overachievers, so a lot of them have multiple degrees, but they didn't want to see each alum duplicated in the final results. So I'm gonna just jump right into Excel because this one really works best demonstrated. But you can see in the example I have here, we've got our alums, Marty McFly and Doc Brown, which if you don't get the reference to who they are, you're missing out on one of the greatest movies of the 20th century, and you really need to brush up on your 1980s pop culture. Anywho. So we can convert this pretty easily using the multiple blocks feature in multi-step reports, which I'm going to jump over and show that if I find the right one, this one. So here's kind of a general list. This is our class of 2007 and their education records. So you can see we don't always have an education record. And for some, we have more than one. We have, in fact, a lot of our alums, like I said, have multiple degrees. We don't always have the degree information, and we don't always have the graduation information. So in order to get these to appear on one line, I can use the, as I mentioned before, the multiple blocks. However, in this list, I only have 136 records. I can probably just scroll down and figure out how many blocks I'd need. But if I have thousands of records, the easiest way to figure out what the most number of education records we have per alum is to just create a simple visualization. I'm just grouping by the contact name, creating a count of records. I sort it descending, and now I know, oh, okay, Daniel here has 4 education records, a few 3s, a bunch of 2s. So if I edit this report, change the education step to show multiple column blocks, change it to 4.
That's how you know how high to make the limit. Okay.
Right, that was just to know how many blocks do I need to make sure I get all of them. However, even though this has solved the problem of showing the alum multiple times, now I've got all this horizontal scrolling that I have to do and all this wasted space. For that one alum who has a 4th education record, I'm creating a lot of extra columns. So What I've done to eliminate that is actually something we've already covered everything that I did here to create this field. I've now concatenated, concatenate multiple blocks. I can't hear you, but I know there was just a collective gasp of joy in seeing this. It's pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. So now we've combined those multiple blocks into one field. If there's year and degree information, it's included. If not, it's not. So let me show you how that's created. Again, I have a calculation step. The formula, let me tell you, this looks really intimidating. There's a lot here, but I'm going to jump back over to the presentation because it kind of makes it, lays it out a little bit easier to see. Mm-hmm. So all I'm doing is creating a concatenation with an if then else. So what I'm saying here is if education 1, notice I'm referencing the education step with a number 1, because if you remember over here, that's how the multiple blocks are identified by the name of the step, and then a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4, or how many ever you have. So if there is an education 1 institution, then give me that. If not, nothing. Plus our concatenate operator. If there's a degree, then give me a hyphen plus the degree. If not, nothing. Plus, if there's a graduation year, then give me another hyphen plus the graduation year. And if not, give me nothing. Plus, then I basically just copied and pasted all of that, changing all the 2s to 1s, then the 2s to 3s and the 3s to 4s. And voila, we have all of the blocks concatenated together. Ta-da! So why I feel like this question goes without saying, mm-hmm. Why did I choose to use Apsona for this? If there is any functionality in native Salesforce reports that can do this, I don't know about it. I think it would take me weeks to figure it out if there is.
Yeah, and you reference generally, I think the reference point is like, yes, you could just take a general report, export it to Excel, do the manual manipulation, but you're basically saved hours on the day of the person that has to do all of that Excel manual manipulation. You've had to invest the time up front to sort of create some of these skills and knowledge around it. But it sounds like the main benefit that I'm seeing just for a stakeholder's perspective is they see the contact and then they see a very simple one field that says all the information they want to see. They don't have to look across 9 columns to see that information. They see it all in one text field, and Apsona's features get you that ability.
Exactly. Yeah, it was.
And you said concatenate for the 4th time. I think that was the other highlight.
Oh, are you keeping track?
I think there's like a gold star somewhere in the background, Pat Sajak or someone. So this is great. So I think you got, one more option, bucketing. Take us home with bucketing. What is bucketing and why is it important?
Great. Perfect. So bucketing is essentially creating groupings, and I'm gonna jump over to Apsona just to show you kind of what I'm talking about. I think it's a little bit easier to explain when you see it. We were asked to create a list, a group. Let me try that again. We wanted to see total giving for the prior fiscal year by class decade, not by class year, but by class decade. And so since this isn't really a field that exists, we have to somehow create it. And there's a couple different ways we can do that. So you can basically just create a nested if then else. A couple things to point out here, the order is really important. The way each value is evaluated is, so let's say the class year is 1965 for a particular row. As it's evaluating this if then else field, it reads the first line. Is 1965 less than or equal to 1949? No, it's not. So the then doesn't apply. We move on to the else. Is 1965 less than or equal to 1959? Nope. Again, we go to the else. Is 1965 less than or equal to 1969. Yes, it is. So now we get 1960s and it stops. That's where it stops evaluating. Once it finds a true condition, that it ends and it returns 1960s. So that's how this if then else works. So the order that you put these in, and it could be the reverse order with greater than or equal to as well. It just, you want to be mindful that you're doing it in the correct order. If I accidentally had this greater than or equal to, it would obviously, you have to apply some like common sense and logic to that. The other way we can create buckets is using a function. And again, this sounds a little bit complex, but it's really not. Essentially, we're doing the same thing. We're within the calculated field, we're declaring that a function is being created. There's going to be a class value that we're going to pass into this variable, this argument. And then essentially it's kind of the same thing. If the class value is less than 1950, I don't know why I didn't less than or equal to 1949 to be consistent. I don't know. And then again, kind of the same. It's really just an if then else. And then at the very end, we're telling it, this is the value that goes into class value. It's the alumni is the name of the step, preferred year is the name of the column. That's our class year field. So you might be thinking, if I can do this with an if then else, why would I create a function? Why did I need to do that? It seems like more work. Well, functions give you a little bit more flexibility. You can also assign other variables and you can perform some other manipulation within a function. And this is also how bucketing is described in the Apsona documentation. So I think it's just a little more, I don't know, it might even be more efficient than an if then else. I'm not 100% sure on that. So why did I use Apsona? If you've ever created a bucket field in native Salesforce reports, they're super easy. You literally just click on the values you want, give the bucket a name, click OK, and voila. However, there are some limitations to the buckets in Salesforce reports. There's a limit both to the number of buckets that can be created and to the total number of values in each bucket. Salesforce documentation says that you can have 20 buckets. However, the limitation is really based on the overall query limit. And I wasn't even able to recreate this field within Salesforce native reports bucket creation. And this is what, like 8 or 9 different buckets. So I feel like there's, maybe a little disconnect, that 20 might be overstating just a little bit. Plus the visualization in Apsona, it's just super easy. Creating the groupings in native Salesforce reports just doesn't always, I don't know, I find it a little bit kludgy. Oh, and this has nothing to do with this specific example or any other example I've shown today, but it's one of my favorite things about Apsona reports is that you can rename columns. So our true class year actual field name is preferred year, but whenever we're showing that on a report, we're going to call it class year or just class. So Apsona gives me the ability to do that, unlike in Salesforce reports, you're stuck with the actual column, actual field name.
Great. So yeah, I have never used the function scenario before, and you are miles ahead of me in this journey in terms of like how to use these, but I'm just happy to sort of see how it's used. I could see myself writing an if then statement, but I'm knowing now, like, hey, I have to make sure I follow a chronological or a sequential order. It has to start at the bottom and go all the way up, like close date or oldest to newest or smallest amount to highest amount. I can't sort of intersperse values. And then this function value looks sort of simple enough. Like I could probably type this out myself. The class
You
value seems to
absolutely
be
could.
a variable, right? So that class value field is just like a temporary variable storing what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. And I have bunches of examples of functions that are a little more involved, and happy to show if anyone wants to see that. But just to summarize what we've covered today, this is just a really small taste of the power of JavaScript and calculated fields in Apsona. I find Apsona to be just a remarkable tool. And like I said before, I wouldn't Salesforce without it. It gives me the ability to, I have less data manipulation in Excel. And again, not knocking Excel. Excel is awesome. Unlimited calculated fields, the use of JavaScript functions, the use of multiple being able to create multiple blocks and then concatenate them. The bucketing that is also unlimited, and saving time. I also included a link here to Apsona's JavaScript documentation, which within that, you also have a couple links to other JavaScript specific documentation that is also really good. So if anyone's wanting to learn more about JavaScript, those are both some really good resources right there.
This is great. So I'm going to keep you a screen sharer for this point, Laurie. Thanks so much for being willing to sort of talk us through that. I do think that Apsona is like a key time-saving tool, and time saving is meant to hopefully make you more effective in your work, i.e., hey, you go to other people on your team and you tell them, show me what you're doing in Excel with your Salesforce data. And or maybe they're coming to you already. Like, I'm really curious, just in offhand, like, how did you know that one staff member that you had was like spending all that time doing that Excel manipulation? Did you go to there and ask, or how did you find out?
I was standing, she was having a problem with something else. And I was standing over her shoulder watching what she was doing. And I was like, wait a minute, are you manually changing all this data? So I feel like sometimes you almost have to just get creative and put stuff out there just so that people know that it's possible, so that your users know that there's easier ways. Or I also try to reach out to my users every once in a while and be like, hey, what are your pain points? What are you working on? Is there anything I can do to make your life easier?
Yeah, you were Salesforce by walking around, right? The acronym SFBWA, like, and that's fantastic. Because I think at some point you came out from behind your desk, you're out there to help people, you're aware of it, but it's unlocking the power that you have in your mind of like, how can I make this work better? The fact that we did this dry run yesterday, Laurie, meant that I actually looked smart on a call. This doesn't happen all the time. When we had a FiniQuest hours yesterday, and I answered the question because it was around the double ampersand. I'm like, I think this is why, but I'm not sure. But we have lots of smart people using Apsona in lots of ways. Laurie is one of them, one of many. We're looking for all of our Apsona Superfans out there. So if you're an Apsona Superfan, you've got a cool thing you want to show off about Apsona, please contact us at justin@apsona.com. Without further ado, let's just sort of wrap up this portion of the recording. We'll keep the recording on, but the portion of the YouTube will just sort of generate and put on the playlist. I'm going to turn it over to our internal team, Chad. Any questions that have sort of cropped up during this call, or any key things that we sort of want to cover specific to the content on this campaign, or I'm sorry, the content on the webinar?
Yeah, we've been answering some questions as we've been going along, and I appreciate some of the things folks have brought up. I think one of the main things here, I think, is we've put a lot of great links in the chat, lots of links to documentation, some external JavaScript links. So please kind of scroll through and copy the links that you're seeing in there. And I don't think that anything specific has come out that we need to address right now, but I'm just still scanning a little bit. If anybody else sees something that should be brought up. Someone asked for the millisecond conversion formula. That was answered in the chat though. So again, paste that good stuff.
Great.
Yeah, this is solid.
Someone commenting on how helpful it is that while you're creating a calculated field, you can reference fields and just put them in. You don't have to like go look for the syntax and type it all in. You just go grab the field and click on it, and it puts it into your calculated field build screen. So I agree, that is a really helpful tip for folks as they're building calculated fields.
And also, kind of as a note on that, if you're creating a single step report, that feature isn't there, as it's just a different interface where you're creating the calculation. So you do have to actually type the field name in, but it's actually a little bit easier because you don't have to reference the step, because there's only one step it's a single step report. So you just need just the name of the field.
Yeah, but that's a good thing that you've mentioned, Laurie, that calculated fields are accessible even on single step report. It's helpful to have that.
Yep, and same, I mean, you can still use, all the same functionality. You can, use JavaScript methods. You can do all the same calculations, create functions.
Excellent.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions. I think this felt like a really good sort of like overview of some live solutions that one Apsona user and sort of Salesforce admin was using to create value for their team. Our Trailblazer community is available all the time. We often try to crowdsource recommendations on people that are solving tough data requests and tough reporting requests. As people are in the chat, if there's questions in the background, so people have questions live, Chad, I'll leave it to you if you want to promote those folks or how you want to handle that for the call.
And if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, if they have a question, I'd be happy to help as well.